Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Wales of Wall Street. We have an IOTA video for you guys today. Of course, one of our favourite projects to discuss on this channel. We've been following IOTA for many years. We've definitely been following their traction with the EBSI. So this is the European Blockchain Infrastructure kind of commission organisation that's been around for a while now and has kind of progressed IOTA through the shortlisting process to help bring a lot of the Web3 or digital services to the European Union, or its members at least. What I mean by members is countries, of which, of course, here in the UK we are not part of anymore. However, we do still have some really interesting adherences towards this progression as well. We'll go into a bit more detail about what's been happening over the last few days. An announcement's come out that's very interesting indeed about the progression of IOTA with the EBSI and that integration from a digital aspect. Before we do that, don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. Make sure you subscribe if you have not done so already. Been in Malta this week. Lovely holiday, well deserved, hopefully, I feel. Very nice. Second year in a row going there, probably back again the third. Very beautiful country. If anyone hasn't been, definitely put it on your list. Absolutely stunning. Lots of history, etc., etc., and of course, home of Chili's and many other crypto projects as well. But yes, unfortunately, I didn't get time to go and say hello to those guys, even though I met them obviously numerous occasions over the last 6-7 months, particularly with the time at Paris Blockchain Week. So let's go into this one, guys. Let's talk about this in a bit more detail. So for those that don't know, there's been kind of like, I'll use this word sandbox actually because it's right in front of me. The last few years, the European Union developed what they call the EBSI. So this is European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, bit of a mouthful, but essentially kind of trying to bring blockchain services together to improve the interoperability between countries, certainly from a digital perspective. This is kind of all the cross-border services that you're probably very familiar with already, finance, etc. AI now, big part of that in terms of regulations, legislations, documentation, trade documentation, trade finance, you name it, across the board, digital identity in general, and just general things like compliance and security, all these things. There's loads of case studies. We'll talk about a couple of instances with this particular movement here. But yes, the EBSI has been working alongside with IOTA over the last few years. I can't remember the exact number when we were first talking about this a couple of years ago, but I think it was something like 100, 200 projects or companies that were basically asked by the EBSI to provide frameworks and infrastructures or case studies as to how their services can work with their commission, that they can then start seeding out to the member countries of the European Union. And as time went by, we then went into phase 2 and then 2A, 2B, to which we're pretty much around that kind of phase area still at this moment in time. Haven't really seen many updates up until the last couple of days, and it's relating to this. So this, by the way, is not suggesting at this moment in time that IOTA has been definitively selected as the wallet of the EU, because each country is going to have its own selection, its own options and solutions, whether they pick companies that are in their own countries or they'll have just general interests, as you can imagine, maybe even politically, who knows, as to what wallet or digital identity wallets they will use for their civilians, for their population, general public. Here in the UK, we followed an interesting development a couple of years ago where the UK government had opened up to pretty much every country in the world or companies in the world within Web3 to create a digital wallet or digital identity wallet as well, not just for finance but identity here in the UK. And that progressed. I think it was called Kin and Carter, and then they randomly got bought out by some crazy fund. We'll try and go back to that story at some point in the next week or so, because it was really interesting and weird developments. It was kind of like it was pre-planned in that way. But there we go. So IOTA at the moment has been selected for this next sandbox phase. There's a number of companies in here for various different reasons, not just for digital identities, but loads of different Web3 orientated solutions that can come to the table. So on June the 13th, literally a few days ago, the European Commission announced the selected participants for the second cohort of its EBSI Among those chosen was IOTA, which we're going to talk about in a second, and there's a few others that they've mentioned here. However, the list was actually quite big. A few names that you can probably stand out for yourselves. Hacken, of course, very interested in terms of compliance and regulating, not necessarily regulating, but kind of verifying companies in the Web3 space. Origin Trail is very interesting. I will do a video separately on these guys. There's a lot of projects kind of like this, but it was really interesting that in particular, these kind of projects were selected as part of that sandbox. You kind of sit in your head and you go, well, hang on a minute, why haven't they chosen Fetch AI or these projects or Singularity, etc., etc.? There's loads of different reasons. But at this moment in time, it's a sandbox perspective. So bringing almost 60 applications from a range of sectors from right across the EU and the EEA by the deadline of 25th of March. So they've gone through all of that, loads of different country orientations as well in this picking process. And then 19 additional use cases were in accordance, carefully curated selection process. So this is what we're working with at the moment from the EBSI's perspectives. Lots of information about each of the different companies as well. Really interesting. DigiShares, I think we've kind of spoken about these guys a few times. Heavily related with real estate exchange. We've talked about real estate and Web3 so many times on this channel. Don't know how many more times I can emphasize the magnitude of that market in the Web3 space. It's not even touched properly yet. It's so early in that market, in that industry. Loads of things, again, around documentation, signage. And the really interesting thing about this is when we're talking about that, including IOTA's participation in this as well, is the interoperability perspective and the speed at which everything can be processed and validated for essentially almost zero fees. Whereas, of course, in the real world at the moment, where we covered some great things, where I was invited to the TFDI event last year with Andre Carstman, etc., and the big conversations there about cost of resource or cost of documentation, and then the processing of documentation, the record keeping, etc. But now we've got things like cloud, we've got AI, we've got connectivity advancements, speed at which transactions or actions of transfer of actions can be done, not just finance, but everything transactional. It's really, really interesting to see that. So we know that IOTA has a huge arm in the space of verification, not just in Web3, but like in terms of like AI and biometric abilities as well. And that really, really does hammer home in the sense that we only have to look around us now. If you rewound like 5-10 years ago, you ask anyone on the street, do you like AI? Do you want AI? Do you want biometrics? This, that, and the other. And they will say no. One really interesting thing that I picked up on the TFDI event last year was one of the prime things that the government wanted to do back in 2015, when there's all this Agenda 30 documentation was signed around the world. They wanted to try and increase the amount of people that use like cashless payments or tap and go, you know, removing the ability to have to go to your bank all the time and still use your debit card, but tap and go or use your phone. And I think they had like a really small percentage number. It's like, I don't know, 400-500% increase over by 2030. In the COVID situation, or the pandemic, I call it, we had an instance of, I think it was something stupid, like 13,000% plus increase in cashless payments. They like literally obliterated their original target in the space of a year and a half, or even a year, and orientated people's change of psychology and philosophy around, oh, I'm not doing that, I will always use the bank, blah, blah, blah. Then the banks started getting taken away from us. You know, the streets are pretty much empty now these days. The banks are non-existent. You have now got chatbots and hardly anyone to speak to at your bank, bar a couple of them, I'm sure. And then what they're doing with our money is another topic altogether. But the point being is that change is inevitable. You just have to adapt to it or accept some of the changes. Now, you can argue all day long these things are coming or they are already here. And my point being about biometrics in that instance is everyone was so against it 5-6 years ago. But then now you've got the argument to say, well, if you don't like it, why are you using your smartphone? It checks your face every day. It knows your face. You've got biometrics on the fingerprints from phones previously. They've all of a sudden gathered the database of your biometrics anyway. So whether we use it for passport terminals at the airport or not is kind of irrelevant. And it's always been used in the streets for many, many years, even without our permission. So all these things are now becoming a regulated part of society where people are like, oh, I see a benefit of this. create the problem for a solution you've already got, and companies will make loads of money from it. Then they create the problem, the solution comes in, hey presto. Oh, I'm fed up with queuing at airports. Oh, here's some biometrics. It speeds it up by X amount of minutes. And you're like, oh, cool, brilliant. Sign me up. So inevitably, the way the human mind is, or just majority of the population, unfortunately, just has to follow the remedy of what's given in front of us. So when we come to talk about things like digital identities, it becomes very important when we're talking about, for example, here in the UK, entry and exit systems and EU travel authorization systems using biometrics. How do we confirm this? Well, we can use the facial recognition, which is linked to your digital identity. Your digital identity is then linked to everything else that you do or don't do, etc., etc. And all of a sudden, in 5-10 years' time, when CBDCs are fully in, or by next November, in my opinion, you've all of a sudden got everything linked together. Interoperability, not just through country to country to country, but you as an individual and everything that you buy and sell and do, your transportation, your carbon emission scores, your social scores. This is not science fiction. This is here today. It's in most countries already. Here in the UK, it's a bit slow, granted, but trials have been done in many countries. Same with basic universal income. If you can't see the patterns, I don't know what more to say. I've been talking about it for a long, long time. But as an investor, this is where you sit here and you go, okay, well, some of this is inevitable. We'll have to follow it, or we can't really get out of the system. But can we make some money at least off this? Well, yes, we can. So we may agree or not agree on whether some of these things are good or bad. But they're inevitable and they're here already. Most of this fingerprinting and biometrics has been around for years. Facial recognition has been around for years. I've worked in IoT. I've worked in AI. I've worked in Web3 blockchain. I've got a very good understanding, a very good history in my mind in the careers that I've had and the companies I work for to understand what's coming. And I took that to my advantage to learn about it, to educate myself, to understand what's coming and how as an investor can you get in front of the game. So I always invested in projects like IOTA because I had a massive understanding of AI, of biometric aspects of digital identities, or how identities can be linked with traditional ways of processing and validating. And then when you've got blockchain on top of that, you've got verifying processing speeds of phenomenal transactions per second, which just speeds everything up. There is no need for someone to sit at a desk anymore and check things for 2-3 minutes. We can do it in a millisecond. Scan face, biometric, hand, face. Does it link up with your documentation? Does it link up with where you've been, what you've been buying, not buying, your CBDCs, your stable coins, whatever you've got or be using moving forward is fully on one system, one interoperable system. As I said, multiple different wallets will be used, but that's where the interoperability aspect comes in. And that's where EBSI in particular comes in, because we now have things like the EU AI Act, Biometrics Act. We have Digital Identity Acts, particularly here in the UK, for example, the last year or so has been concluding around the Electronic Trade Bill Act. This is exactly what I'm talking about. When you start linking these keywords together, you start understanding, wow, there's a huge opportunity here, because you're talking about, millions upon millions upon millions of people. And this is just traveling around the world, traveling around Europe all day, every day. Even in tube stations, everything you can possibly think of, ports, getting the ferry, whatever it might be, is all going to be used. So how do we process all this? Well, you need something very significant in the back end, i.e. blockchain, to process and validate everything with AI for that deep learning mechanism, image learning. When I'm talking about images, I'm talking about whether it's in the hospital, about x-rays or DNA structures or your passport photos, whatever it might be. It all works together, and then it's stored on things like cloud, and it's backed with blockchain in terms of its validation. And then connectivity wise, you've got phenomenal fiber speeds. You've now got 4G and you've got 5G if you want remote locations. Then you open up the rest of the world, because there's a lot of countries in the world that don't have connectivity. Now we've got Starlink up there in the sky. Can you see what I'm saying? So we loop back round to, well, why is this interesting? Well, IOTA hasn't been specifically selected as the wallet. It's part of the Sandbox. You can probably inevitably say that IOTA will be used at some point or somewhere within the European Union as a digital identity wallet, or at least a servicing solution or advising scheme for that. And therefore, as an investor, that's very interesting because you are talking about millions of people using these services on a daily basis. As I said, it's not just finance. It's literally anything and everything that we will be doing moving forwards. So that's why I think this is such a huge development in that process of the EBSI, and particularly with IOTA, us as holders, or if you're new to IOTA, check out our introductory videos, check out our videos on DAG, which is essentially the protocol that they're using, direct acyclic graph. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I go into very big detail on that because then you start aligning the stars to see what's coming. And when if you are with me from the beginning, all those things I talked about in the past about IOTA, this is what I was talking about. These days will come, and they will come faster than people think. And here we are today talking about one of those very interesting developments that is now being backed with proper regulation and compliance legally through European Union, through the UK Parliament, everywhere around the world. And we loop that back. World Economic Forum already wanted to push all this for years and years. They put people, presidents, prime ministers into place to get the crypto bills through, to get these bills through on AI biometrics. That was done and dusted. There's no doubt in my mind by the end of this year, we'll have new prime ministers and presidents around the world that are going to take us in the next phase. It will look like we got democracy. It will look like we got a new party in or a new presidency in. It's all the same thing. Okay? It's just we're going with the flow. So this is really exciting, guys, as an investor, to see IOTA's progression and formatting in this Sandbox initiative. And what I would like to say as well, we'll just talk about the price point of IOTA, because it's quite fitting in a sense that what I mentioned earlier, if you're new to IOTA, this could be quite an interesting point in time where you may want to look at first positions. This is not financial advice. This is just my opinion. And if I was new to IOTA and I knew all the things I did know about IOTA today and didn't have it, I'd be looking quite closely at the charts right now. At the moment, we're in a bit of a negative progress with the IOTA price point in the market. You see it's red on most of these indicators on the right-hand side, bar the year one. But what interests me is that I missed most of this opportunity the last time around when it came to around 15 cents. I've been buying IOTA for a long time. I've held it since around 2020. I didn't really do anything with any sell-offs. I'm holding this for the long run. I think it's got massive opportunity. I was taking advantage of staking for the Shimmer tokens and at the point Assembly tokens before that got trashed. But yes, Shimmer is very interesting as well, part of the system of IOTA. We'll talk about that in other videos, and we have covered that before. But you see even most recent uprises up to this 39.40 cents. So there's definitely potential to have some short bursts of movement as time goes by in short periods of time. I'm just going to stretch this across just so we can see. So I'm taking one of these lower points back here in August 2023 to one of the higher points more recently in March 2024. And you can see there's a lot of movement play here. So we could be seeing a lot of sideways traction around this sort of 20 to 15 cent mark. I'm very interested to see, if I just zoom in a bit more here, how we will play around between that 20 and 30 cent mark. Because actually, if I take back down to one of these lower regions, you can start breaking down some of the areas that we could hit, or at least see where it's going to be trying to play around with. So at the moment, of course, you can see the breakdown has just hit the 19 cents. We're currently, as a recording, around that kind of mark. We did have a slight touchdown to around the lower markers of 18 cents. Could we, if we did get some stability around this sort of 18 cent mark, we might break that level and retest a 16 cent at some point, which we haven't seen really. I think the last time was around about December 2023. So nearly 7 months ago. And in some cases, you do get these breakdowns when the market crashes over a day or two period. That might be the case. So I think for now, where I haven't really been buying IOTA too much, I'm going to be starting to do my DCAing. One at these current positions around 1890 cents, and I will be waiting patiently for that lower 17 cent mark, and of course around about that sort of 15.5 cent mark as well. So I'm going to leave these markers in here. We'll see what happens over the coming weeks. This isn't something that I expect to happen overnight unless we have a market crash for some reason, which we might see that drop down really quickly and then retrace itself back up to original levels. So they're my plays for the moment. You see the RSIs at the bottom left here, 36 and 40, showing that is a great bite point for me on the 14-day and a definite confirmation on the 28-day. So the longer term patterns, I'm seeing that there's definitely more upside than there is low side. That's not to say that's not going to happen, but when I'm DCAing, I'm not throwing all my money in. I'm just putting a small percentage in at these various different stages, because we don't know exactly where the highs and the lows will be. So we just have to take a bit more of a risk element to this, or risk management element, and be strict with removing that emotion and being a bit more strategic in general. So there's definitely, in my opinion, an opportunity there for it to come down a bit lower, but I still want to take advantage of these lower prices than they were a few weeks ago for sure. I was a bit annoyed that I haven't been really paying attention to the markets over the last few months, because many of you know it's been a bit of a tricky sort of 7 months in the household. But when you're seeing uprise, it's great for everyone that's making and taking profits. As I said, I'm a long-time holder of IOTA, but I do want to be getting the lowest positions possible. So I think this is almost like a warning sign to me to say, well, we got to around 40 cents in those uprises around March time. I can definitely take advantage of the fact that this is more than 50% reduction in price, and for such a significant project for the future. I'm sure it will have some short-term gains in general as well. The previous all-time high suggests that in our next bull cycle that we should really be seeing some significant movements in IOTA's price, moving way beyond that previous all-time high. In fact, we could argue that the next stage up as a bare minimum should really be towards that $4 mark. So from the current price of 20 cents, even went to the previous all-time high, it's still a very decent return on that investment for sure. And in fact, I'll just draw those two in really quickly. So the current rough price point here to that previous all-time high is staggering, really, 1,300%. And if you take it up to that next benchmark on the Fib retracement, you're looking at 2,253% increase, which is quite phenomenal, really. And I do think IOTA has that ability to do so. I think more people will become aware of it. It's still not really talked about too much, to be honest. I don't know why, but it's a phenomenal technology, as well as a blockchain in general as well. So they're my thoughts and feelings around IOTA. Let us know what you think in the comments below. What have you been doing with your IOTA? Have you been buying, selling, accumulating, holding, or are you new to IOTA? As I said, go and check out the previous videos. We're going to wrap that up there. Lots of big things happening for IOTA. We'll see you in the next update video. Take care and bye-bye.